Question 1. Clinical trial design and statistical considerations. In Afitizoman clinical trial testing a new drug for hypertension, the study aims to evaluate the reduction in blood pressure as the primary endpoint. The trial is randomized, double-blinded, and controlled with two groups, a treatment group and a placebo group. The sample size is calculated to achieve 80% power, a 5% significance level. After the trial completes, the data analysis reveals that the treatment group shows a statistically significant reduction in blood pressure compared to the placebo group. Which of the following is the most likely reason for achieving statistical significance in this study? A. The use of a larger sample size ensures greater power, reducing type I errors. B. Randomization ensures that baseline characteristics are equally distributed, minimizing bias. C. The double-blind design minimizes the risk of subjective influence on outcomes. D. The placebo-controlled design ensures that the observed effect is due to the treatment. Answer. B. Randomization ensures that baseline characteristics are equally distributed, minimizing bias. Explanation. Randomization is a key principle in clinical trial design to ensure that participants are assigned to treatment or control groups in a way that minimizes bias and allows for a fair comparison between the groups. By randomizing the participants, we increase the likelihood that the treatment and placebo groups will have baseline characteristics, such as age, gender, and other health factors, which can influence the outcome. This minimizes confounding factors and ensures that the observed effect is due to the treatment itself and not to any underlying differences between the groups. Option A. While a larger sample size helps to reduce Roman errors and improve power, it is not the main reason for statistical significance in this case. Option C. The double-blind design reduces bias by preventing both participants and investigators from influencing the results, but this alone does not explain statistical significance. Option D. The placebo-controlled design ensures that any observed effect can be attributed to the treatment, but the primary factor influencing statistical significance is the distribution of baseline characteristics, which is best achieved through randomization. Question 2. Regulatory affairs and compliance. A clinical trial is being conducted on a new investigational drug, and the sponsor has submitted an investigational new drug IND application to the FDA for approval. During the trial, adverse events AES are reported by several participants, including severe allergic reactions and liver enzyme abnormalities. The sponsor is required to submit periodic safety reports to the FDA. According to FDA regulations, what is the required time frame for submitting an in-safety report after learning of a serious adverse event? A. Within 15 calendar days of learning of the SAE. B. Within 7 calendar days of learning of the SAE. C. Within 30 calendar days of learning of the SAE. D. Within 14 calendar days of learning of the SAE. Answer A. Within 15 calendar days of learning of the Explanation. According to FDA regulations, sponsors are required to submit an in-safety report to the FDA within 15 calendar days of learning of a serious adverse event. This is part of the sponsor's obligation to ensure participant safety and monitor the risk profile of the investigational drug throughout the clinical trial process. The safety report should include information about the actions taken, and any necessary amendments to the trial protocol to address the issue. Option B. This time frame is too short and does not align with the FDA requirements for serious adverse events. Option C. This time frame is used for submitting annual safety reports, not for reporting serious adverse events. Option D. While the time frame is relatively short, the correct requirement is 15 calendar days, not 14. Question 3. Scenario-based question. Clinical trial monitoring. Mr. Stevens is Clinical Research Associate, CRA, monitoring phase and clinical trial investigating the efficacy of new cancer treatment. During routine monitoring visit, Mr. Stevens notices that the investigational product IP at the site is being stored improperly outside the required temperature range. He also finds that some case report form ERFS missing data. Mr. Stevens must decide how to address these issues during his visit. What should Mr. Stevens do to ensure compliance and protect participant safety? A. Immediately report the findings to the sponsor and initiate corrective actions with the site. B. Ignore the storage issue, as it is unlikely to affect the outcome, and document the missing data in the monitoring report. C. Reassure the investigator that the storage issue is not major concern and continue monitoring. D. Inform the site staff that they must correct the issues by the end of the day to avoid further action. Answer A. Immediately report the findings to the sponsor and initiate corrective actions with the site. Explanation as ACRA, Mr. Stevens has the responsibility to ensure that the trial is conducted in compliance with good clinical practice GCP and regulatory requirements. When he identifies issues such as improper investigational product storage or missing data in RFS, it is crucial that he addresses these problems promptly to protect participant safety and maintain the integrity of the study. Option is the best course of action, as reporting the findings to the sponsor and initiating corrective actions is necessary to prevent any further non-compliance. Corrective actions might include retraining site staff, ensuring proper storage conditions are met, and following up on missing data. Option B is incorrect because ignoring the storage issue can compromise the safety and effectiveness of the investigational product, and failing to address missing data would violate study integrity. Option C is not acceptable because the storage issue must be addressed immediately and reassurance without action is not adequate. Option D is too lenient and does not demonstrate the level of urgency required in addressing non-compliance or participant safety concerns. Question 4. Adverse event reporting and monitoring. A clinical trial is being conducted on a new drug for diabetes. During a monitoring visit, the CRUD discovers that an investigator has failed to report a serious adverse event within the required time frame. The A involved a participant who experienced a severe allergic reaction after receiving the investigational drug. The investigator did not submit the required safety report. Sponsor or regulatory authorities. What is the appropriate course of action for the CRA to take in this situation? A. Immediately inform the sponsor and regulatory authorities about the delayed reporting and recommend corrective action. B. Ignore the issue and let the investigator handle the reporting at their discretion. C. Advise the investigator to submit the safety report within 24 hours and continue monitoring without further action. D. Wait for the next monitoring visit to address the delayed AU report. Answer A. Immediately inform the sponsor and regulatory authorities about the delayed reporting and recommend corrective action. Explanation. The CRO is responsible for ensuring that safety issues are addressed promptly and in compliance with regulatory requirements. Serious adverse events, SEAs, must be reported to the sponsor and regulatory authorities within specific timeframes, usually within 15 calendar days for FDA-regulated studies. In this case, the investigator's failure to submit the safety report within the required timeframe compromises participant safety and violates regulatory requirements. The CRO must inform both the sponsor and regulatory authorities immediately and recommend corrective actions, which may include retraining the investigator and improving documentation practices. Option B. Ignoring the issue would jeopardize participant safety and violate ethical and regulatory guidelines. Option C. Advising the investigator to report the AO within 24 hours without escalating the issue to the sponsor and regulatory authorities is insufficient. Option D. Waiting for the next monitoring visit to address the issue is too delayed, as it could lead to further regulatory violations. Question 5. Risk-based monitoring in clinical trials. A clinical research team is conducting a global trial with multiple international sites. The sponsor has implemented a risk-based monitoring approach using centralized data monitoring to identify sites with potential issues such as data inconsistencies or protocol deviations. After several months of monitoring, one site is flagged due to data anomalies. The CRO must decide how to handle the situation. What should the CRO do to manage this site effectively? A. Perform a full on-site monitoring visit to assess the source of the data anomalies and ensure data integrity. B. Continue monitoring the site remotely and rely solely on centralized data to assess the site's performance. C. Increase the frequency of monitoring visits to all sites, including those that are performing well. D. Ignore the anomalies and focus on monitoring sites with no identified issues. Answer A. Perform a full on-site monitoring visit to assess the source of the data anomalies and ensure data integrity. Explanation. Risk-based monitoring involves identifying sites with potential issues early on and addressing them proactively. In this case, the data anomalies flagged during centralized monitoring suggest potential issues with data integrity or adherence to the protocol. The CRO should perform a full on-site monitoring visit to investigate root cause of the anomalies, conduct source document verification, and ensure that the site is following the protocol and maintaining data integrity. This is an essential part of ensuring the quality of the trial and protecting participant safety. Option B. Relying solely on centralized data is insufficient, as on-site visits are necessary to verify the accuracy of the data and ensure compliance. Option C. Increasing the frequency of monitoring visits at all sites may not be necessary and could be resource-intensive without addressing the root cause of the issue. Option D. Ignoring the anomalies is unacceptable, as they may indicate significant problems with the site's data or practices. Question 6. Investigator responsibilities and compliance. During a site initiation visit (SIV) for a phytomonoclinical trial, the CRO reviews the site's procedures for handling the investigation or product IP and notices that the investigator has not adequately documented the temperature of the storage area for the IP. The CRO advises the investigator to begin recording the temperature daily, but the investigator is resistant to make change, citing lack of resources. What should the CRO do next to ensure compliance and protect participant safety? A. Ignore the investigator's reluctance and proceed with monitoring other aspects of the trial. B. Document the issue in the monitoring report and inform the sponsor of the investigator's failure to comply with storage requirements. C. Advise the investigator that temperature documentation is optional and does not affect the integrity of the trial. D. Give the investigator more time to address the issue and schedule a follow-up meeting at the next month. Answer. B. Document the issue in the monitoring report and inform the sponsor of the investigator's failure to comply with storage requirements. Explanation. As part of the site initiation visit (SIV), the CRO is responsible for ensuring that the site follows all regulatory and trial-specific requirements, including proper investigation or product IP storage. If the investigator is resistant to complying with the temperature document requirements, the CRO must document the issue in the monitoring report and escalate it to the sponsor. The sponsor may need to take corrective action, such as providing additional resources or training to ensure that the site meets the necessary requirements to maintain trial integrity and participant safety. Option A. Ignoring the issue could compromise the integrity of the trial and participant safety, especially if the IP is not stored within the required temperature range. Option C. Temperature documentation is a critical part of ensuring the safety and efficacy of the investigation or product, and it is not optional. Option D. Giving more time without taking corrective action is insufficient, as it could lead to non-compliance with regulatory requirements. Question 7. Site monitoring and data integrity. During a site monitoring visit for a phasoma study, the CRO identifies discrepancies between the data recorded in the case report for MURFS and the source documents. The discrepancies include missing data and incorrect values that do not match the participants' medical records. The CRO suspects that these issues may be related to data entry errors. What is the appropriate action to take in this situation? A. Document the discrepancies in the monitoring report and provide training to the site staff on proper data entry procedures. B. Ignore the discrepancies, as they may be minor errors that do not affect the overall outcome of the study. C. Immediately remove the site from the study and replace the investigator. D. Report the discrepancies to regulatory authorities and halt the study at that site. Answer A. Document the discrepancies in the monitoring report and provide training to the site staff on proper data entry procedures. Explanation. Data integrity is a cornerstone of clinical trials, and any discrepancies between the RFS and source documents must be addressed promptly. In this case, the CRO should document the discrepancies in the monitoring report and work with the site staff to ensure they understand proper data entry procedures, resolve any issues. Providing training can help prevent future errors and ensure that the site maintains compliance with good clinical practice (GCP) and regulatory guidelines. Option B. Ignoring discrepancies can compromise the trial's data integrity and violate ethical and regulatory standards. Option C. Removing the site and replacing the investigator without attempting to resolve the issue would be premature. The CRO should first attempt to correct the issue through training. Option D. Reporting the discrepancies to regulatory authorities and halting the study is an extreme measure that should only be considered if the issues cannot be resolved and threaten the safety of the trial. Question 8. Informed consent process. A new clinical trial is being conducted for a drug targeting Alzheimer's disease. The research team is conducting a study with older participants, some of whom have cognitive impairments. During the informed consent process, the CRO notices that some participants have signed the consent forms without fully understanding the information provided to them. What should the CRO do to ensure that the informed consent process conducted ethically and in compliance with regulations? A. Allow the participants to continue in the study as long as they have signed the consent form. B. Discuss the concerns with the investigator and suggest modifications to the informed consent process to better accommodate participants with cognitive impairments. C. Immediately remove all participants with cognitive impairments from the study. D. Proceed with the study as planned, assuming that the investigator has properly assessed the participants' ability to informed consent. Answer. B. Discuss the concerns with the investigator and suggest modifications to the informed consent process to better accommodate participants with cognitive impairments. Explanation. Informed consent is a fundamental ethical principle in clinical research. For participants with cognitive impairments, it is essential to ensure that they fully understand the study's risks and benefits before consenting to participate. The CRO must address any concerns about the informed consent process, working with the investigator to modify the process, e.g. through additional support, legally authorized representative, or more straightforward language to ensure that participants can make an informed decision. Option A. Allowing participants to continue without fully understanding the consent is unethical and violates regulatory requirements. Option C. Removing participants with cognitive impairments from the study without further consideration would be inappropriate. Alternative accommodations should be made to support their participation. Option D. Assuming that the investigator has properly assessed consent without addressing concerns about comprehension would be insufficient. Question 9. Clinical trial monitoring and source data verification. During a monitoring visit, the CRO notices that the source documents at a clinical trial site do not fully align with the data entered in the case report form ERFS. The CRO observes several discrepancies, such as missing signatures and incomplete dates in the patient medical records. What is the CRO's best course of action to ensure the accuracy and completeness of the data? A. Report the discrepancies to the sponsor and recommend corrective action, including additional source document review and training for the site staff. B. Ignore the discrepancies as they are minor and unlikely to affect the trial outcome. C. Document the discrepancies and ask the investigator to sign off on them without additional action. D. Immediately terminate the site's participation in the trial. Answer A. Report the discrepancies to the sponsor and recommend corrective action, including additional source document review and training for the site staff. Explanation. It is essential to ensure that source documents and case report form ERFS are consistent to maintain the integrity of clinical trial data. The CRO should report the discrepancies to the sponsor and work with the site to correct the issues. This might include additional training for the site staff, proper documentation procedures, and performing source document verification to ensure data accuracy. Option B. Ignoring the discrepancies would violate regulatory requirements and compromise the study's data quality. Option C. Simply asking the investigator to sign off on the discrepancies without addressing the underlying issues is inadequate. Option D. Terminating the site's participation without trying to address the issue is too drastic without first taking corrective action. Question 10. Compliance with good clinical practice GE. A new investigator is conducting a clinical trial at the site and is not familiar with good clinical practice GCP guidelines. The CRO notices that the investigator is not properly documenting adverse events AES and not maintaining proper records of informed consent. What is the CRO's responsibility in this situation? A. Provide GCP training to the investigator and inform the sponsor of the need for additional support at the site. B. Ignore the lack of GCP compliance as the investigator is new and will improve over time. C. Report the issue directly to regulatory authorities without informing the sponsor first. D. Allow the investigator to continue without intervention, assuming the trial is progressing smoothly. Answer A. Provide GCP training to the investigator and inform the sponsor of the need for additional support at the site. Explanation. GCP guidelines are crucial to ensuring the safety of participants and the integrity of the trial data. As the CRO, you are responsible for identifying and addressing GCP violations. In this case, the CRO should provide the investigator with the necessary GCP training and work with the sponsor to additional support is provided to the site to rectify these issues. Option B, ignoring the lack of compliance is unacceptable as it can lead to regulatory violations and jeopardize participant safety. Option C, while regulatory authorities must be notified in the event of severe non-compliance, the issue should be first addressed by the sponsor to correct the situation. Option D, allowing the investigator to continue without intervention could lead to further issues and regulatory non-compliance. Question 11. Handling of investigational product IP. During a monitoring visit, the CRO observes that the investigational product IP is not stored according to the protocol requirements at a study site. The site staff is storing the IP at room temperature while the protocol specifies that it must be refrigerated at 2 to 8 dec. What is the CRO's immediate course of action? A. Inform the investigator and site staff of the temperature violation and request immediate corrective action to store the IP according to protocol. B. Document the violation in the monitoring report and continue with the monitoring visit without addressing the issue. C. Ask the site staff to continue storing the IP at room temperature until the next monitoring visit. D. Report the violation to regulatory authorities immediately and halt study at that site. Answer A. Inform the investigator and site staff of the temperature violation and request immediate corrective action to store the IP according to protocol. Explanation. It is critical to adhere to storage requirements to maintain the stability and efficacy of the investigational product IP. The CRO should inform the investigator and site staff about the violation and request that they take immediate corrective actions, such as moving the IP to the storage conditions. Ensuring compliance with storage requirements helps maintain the integrity of the trial and participant safety. Option B. Failing to address the violation would compromise the integrity of the investigational product and potentially violate regulatory guidelines. Option C. Allowing the IP to continue being stored incorrectly puts the study at risk of protocol non-compliance and participant safety concerns. Option D. Reporting the violation to regulatory authorities is an option, but immediate corrective action at the site is typically the first step. Question 12. Protocol deviations and corrective actions. A site is conducting a clinical trial, and the CRO identifies that several protocol deviations have occurred. For example, a few participants were administered the wrong dose of the investigational product, and some participants have missed scheduled visits. What should the CRO do to manage the situation? A. Document the deviations in the monitoring report, inform the sponsor, and recommend corrective actions such as retraining and additional monitoring. B. Ignore the protocol deviations as they are minor and will not affect the trial outcome. C. Immediately terminate the site from the study for not adhering to the protocol. D. Notify the participants involved and ask them to continue the study as scheduled. Answer A. Document the deviations in the monitoring report, inform the sponsor, and recommend corrective actions such as retraining and additional monitoring. Explanation. Protocol deviations must be documented and reported to the sponsor as they can impact the validity of the trial results and participant safety. The CRO should document all deviations in the monitoring report and work with the sponsor to recommend corrective actions such as retraining site staff and enhancing monitoring to prevent future deviations. Option B. Ignoring protocol deviations can lead to non-compliance with regulatory requirements and impact data integrity. Option C. Terminating the site without first attempting corrective action would be an extreme measure. Option D. Notifying participants and asking them to continue without addressing the deviations can lead to further complications and ethical issues. Question 13. Ensuring ethical considerations in clinical trials. A participant in a clinical trial for a new cancer treatment expresses concerns about potential side effects but agrees to continue participation after being reassured by the investigator. The CRO is reviewing the informed consent process and notices that the risks were not adequately explained during the consent process. What action should the CRO take? A. Recommend that the investigator revisit the informed consent process with the participant and ensure they fully understand the risks before continuing. B. Allow the participant to continue in the study as long as they have signed the consent form. C. Report the issue directly to regulatory authorities and halt the study. D. Do nothing as the participant has already signed the consent form and expressed willingness to continue. Answer A. Recommend that the investigator revisit the informed consent process with the participant and ensure they fully understand the risks before continuing. Explanation. Informed consent is an ongoing process that ensures participants are fully aware of the risks and benefits of their participation in a clinical trial. The CRO should recommend that the investigator revisit the informed consent process, particularly in light of the participants' concerns Participant must fully understand the risks before continuing to participate in the study. Option B. Allowing the participant to continue without revisiting the consent process would violate ethical guidelines and regulatory requirements. Option C. Reporting the issue to regulatory authorities without first attempting to resolve it with the investigator is premature. Option D. Doing nothing would be unethical, as the participant's understanding of the risks is crucial for informed decision-making. Question 14. Informed consent and participant understanding. During an on-site monitoring visit, the CRO observes that an investigator obtained informed consent from a participant, but the participant appears confused about the purpose of the trial and its potential risks. The participant later expresses discomfort with the procedures involved in the trial. What should the CRO do to address this situation? A. Recommend that the investigator re-explain the study to the participant, ensuring they fully understand the risks and benefits and document the conversation. B. Allow the participant to continue without further intervention, as they have already signed the consent form. C. Terminate the participant's enrollment immediately without further action. D. Report the issue to the sponsor, but take no further action at the site. Answer A. Recommend that the investigator re-explain the study to the participant, ensuring they fully understand the risks and benefits and document the conversation. Explanation. Informed consent is a continuous process, and the participant must fully understand the trial before agreeing to participate. If there are concerns about the participant's understanding, the CRO should recommend that the investigator revisit the informed consent process, clarify confusion, and ensure the participant's comprehension. This process should be documented for regulatory compliance. Option B. Allowing the participant to continue without ensuring they understand the trial would violate ethical principles. Option C. Terminating the participant without first attempting to correct the misunderstanding is premature. Option D. Reporting the issue is important, but immediate corrective action at the site is necessary to ensure participant safety and compliance. Question 15. Data integrity and reporting. A clinical trial site submits monthly data to the sponsor, but the CRO notices a pattern of data inconsistencies in the case report form ERFS. The discrepancies appear to be systematically related to specific data entry errors, such as incorrect dates and treatment regimens. What should the CRO do? A. Notify the sponsor, document the discrepancies, and suggest additional training for site staff to improve data accuracy. B. Ignore the discrepancies, as they are minor and unlikely to affect the study's outcome. C. Immediately terminate the site's participation in the trial. D. Submit the data to the sponsor without reporting the discrepancies, as the site is already behind schedule. Answer A. Notify the sponsor, document the discrepancies, and suggest additional training for site staff to improve data accuracy. Explanation. Ensuring the accuracy of the data is critical for the validity of the clinical trial. The CRO should document the discrepancies, notify the sponsor, and recommend corrective actions, including further training of site staff on proper data entry procedures. Option B. Ignoring discrepancies can compromise the integrity of the data and violate regulatory requirements. Option C. Terminating the site should not be the first action. Corrective measures should be attempted first. Option D. Submitting the data without addressing the discrepancies compromises data integrity and could lead to regulatory non-compliance. Question 16. Safety reporting in clinical trials. A participant in a clinical trial reports experiencing a serious adverse event during a routine follow-up visit. The event is potentially related to the investigational product, but the investigator does not report the to the sponsor within the required timeline. What is the CRO's role in this situation? A. Document the late reporting and notify the sponsor immediately to ensure compliance with safety reporting requirements. B. Ignore the late reporting as it does not affect the trial's outcome. C. Notify the participant that their has been reported and they are no longer eligible to continue in the trial. D. Terminate the investigator for not adhering to the reporting requirements. Answer A. Document the late reporting and notify the sponsor immediately to ensure compliance with safety reporting requirements. Explanation. The CRO is responsible for ensuring that safety reports, including SAYs, are submitted on time in accordance with regulatory requirements. If the investigator fails to report within the required time frame, the CRO should document this and notify the sponsor so that the issue can be addressed promptly. Option B. Ignoring the issue could lead to regulatory violations and endanger participant safety. Option C. The CRA should not directly inform the participant about reporting delays or eligibility status. This should be handled by the investigator. Option D. Terminating the investigator is an extreme measure. The CRA should work to ensure compliance rather than immediately penalize the investigator. Question 17. Monitoring visits and site compliance. During a routine monitoring visit, the CRA observes that the site is not maintaining proper records of informed consent for a number of participants. Some records are missing signatures, while others lack proper dates. What should the CRA do next? A. Notify the investigator and site staff about the non-compliance, recommend corrective actions, and document the issue in the monitoring report. B. Ignore the issue as it is, a minor administrative oversight. C. Report the issue to regulatory authorities without informing the sponsor. D. Immediately remove the site from the study for non-compliance. Answer A. Notify the investigator and site staff about the non-compliance, recommend corrective actions, and document the issue in the monitoring report. Explanation: proper documentation of informed consent is essential for participant safety and regulatory compliance. The CRA should notify the site staff and investigator about the issue, recommend corrective actions. E.g., reviewing and completing the missing records, and document the problem in a monitoring report. Option B. Ignoring the issue could result in regulatory non-compliance and jeopardize the integrity of the trial. Option C. Reporting to regulatory authorities is necessary in serious cases, but should not be the first step in addressing site non-compliance. Option D. Removing the site from the study should only occur after all corrective actions have been attempted and if the non-compliance persists. Question 18. Risk management in clinical trials. A clinical trial is underway and the CRA notices that several participants have experienced mild side effects from the investigational product. These side effects have not led to any serious adverse events, but they do raise questions about the product's safety. What action should the CRA take? A. Document the side effects, notify the sponsor, and ensure the investigator assesses the participants' reactions according to the protocol. B. Ignore the side effects as they are mild and unlikely to affect the outcome of the trial. C. Immediately report the side effects to regulatory authorities and halt the trial. D. Tell the investigator to advise the participants to stop the treatment and withdraw from the trial. Answer A. Document the side effects, notify the sponsor, and ensure the investigator assesses the participants' reactions according to the protocol. Explanation: even mild side effects should be documented and the sponsor should be notified so they can assess whether any additional safety measures need to be taken. The CRA should ensure the investigator follows the protocol for assessing and documenting adverse events (AES) and decides whether further is needed. Option B. Ignoring side effects would be unethical and could lead to failure in identifying safety concerns early. Option C. Immediate reporting to regulatory authorities is not necessary unless the side effects become severe or lead to serious adverse events. Option D. Telling the investigator to stop treatment may be premature without proper evaluation and discussion with the sponsor. Question 19. Investigator responsibilities in clinical trials. During a site monitoring visit, the CRA observes that the investigator is delegating some of their responsibilities to study coordinators without ensuring that they are adequately trained to perform the tasks. The investigator is also not reviewing case report form or RFS for completeness before submission. What should the CRA do in this situation? A. Document the issue in the monitoring report, notify the investigator about their responsibilities, and recommend additional training for the site staff. B. Immediately report the investigator to the sponsor and suggest termination of the investigator from the trial. C. Allow the investigator to continue delegating tasks as they see fit, since they are experienced in conducting clinical trials. D. Ignore the issue since the site is meeting recruit goals and the data quality seems acceptable. Answer A. Document the issue in the monitoring report, notify the investigator about their responsibilities, and recommend additional training for the site staff. Explanation: the investigator is responsible for ensuring that the study is conducted according to the protocol, good clinical practice (GCP), and applicable regulations. Delegation of tasks should be done to qualified personnel, and the investigator should verify all study-related activities, including the review of RFS. The CRA should document any deficiencies and recommend corrective actions, such as additional training. Option B. Terminating the investigator should be a last resort after attempt to correct the issues. Option C. Delegating tasks without ensuring staff competency violate GCP and could compromise participant safety and data integrity. Option D. The CRO must address any compliance issues regardless of recruitment success or data quality. Question 20. Sample size calculation in clinical trials. A clinical trial is designed to assess the efficacy of a new drug for a specific disease. The sample size is calculated based on a desired power of 80%, an alpha level of 0.5, and an expected effect size of 0.5. During the trial, the clinical research team finds that the observed effect size is smaller than expected. What impact will this have on an interpretation of the trial? A. The sample size calculation will need to be adjusted, as a smaller effect size requires a larger sample to maintain statistical power. B. The sample size will remain adequate, as the original power and alpha levels do not change. C. The trial can be completed as planned, and the observed effect size will not affect the conclusions. D. The trial results will be invalid since the effect size is smaller than expected. Answer A. The sample size calculation will need to be adjusted, as a smaller effect size requires a larger sample to maintain statistical power. Explanation. A smaller effect size reduces the statistical power of a study. In such cases, the sample size must be recalculated to ensure that the trial maintains its power to detect a true effect. If the trial is not adequately powered, the results may be inconclusive or lead to a tapperment, failing to detect a true effect. Option B. The original sample size might not be sufficient if the observed effect size is smaller than expected, necessitating a recalculation. Option C. If the observed effect size is smaller, the trial conclusions may need to be reconsidered, especially if the power is compromised. Option D. The trial results are not automatically invalidated, but the smaller effect size could affect statistical significance and the power of the analysis. Question 21. Data integrity and source document verification. During a monitoring visit, the CRO finds that the site has not been verifying the source documents as required by the protocol. The site has also been entering data directly into the ECF without proper source documentation to support it. What should the CRO do in this situation? A. Notify the investigator and site staff of the issue, ensure they understand the importance of source document verification, and document the finding in the monitoring report. B. Ignore the issue, as the data entry seems accurate and the site has already met recruitment targets. C. Report the site to the regulatory authorities for failing to maintain source document verification. D. Recommend that the site stop using the ECF system, revert to paper-based data entry. Answer A. Notify the investigator and site staff of the issue, ensure they understand the importance of source document verification, and document the finding in the monitoring report. Explanation. Source document verification is a critical aspect of maintaining data integrity in clinical trials. The CRO should notify the investigator and site staff about the non-compliance and provide guidance on how to ensure proper verification of documents. This action should be documented in the monitoring report for regulatory compliance. Option B. Ignoring the issue compromises data integrity and could lead to regulatory non-compliance. Option C. Reporting to regulatory authorities is premature unless the site repeatedly fails to comply with essential requirements after corrective action attempts. Option D. Reverting to paper-based data entry is not the solution to source document issues. Proper procedures for both ECF and paper documentation should be followed. Question 22. Protocol deviations and non-compliance. During a monitoring visit, the CRO learns that a participant in a clinical trial was enrolled despite not meeting the inclusion criteria for the trial. The investigator explains that the participant was enrolled because of a misunderstanding regarding the protocol's inclusion criteria. What should the CRO do in this situation? A. Document the protocol deviation, discuss it with the investigator, and recommend corrective actions to prevent future occurrences. B. Immediately remove the participant from the trial and report the deviation to the regulatory authorities. C. Ignore the deviation as the participant has already been enrolled and the trial is proceeding as planned. D. Report the deviation to the sponsor and recommend terminating the investigator's involvement in it. Answer A. Document the protocol deviation, discuss it with the investigator, and recommend corrective actions to prevent future occurrences. Explanation. Protocol deviations are common in clinical trials, but they must be documented and managed to ensure compliance with the study protocol and regulatory requirements. The CRO should discuss the deviation with the investigator, determine the corrective actions needed, such as rescreening participants more carefully, and document the findings. Option B. Removing the participant should only occur if the deviation affects their safety or the trial's integrity. Reporting to regulatory authorities is not necessary unless the deviation significantly impacts the trial. Option C. Ignoring protocol deviations violate GCP guidelines and could jeopardize the validity of the trial. Option D. Terminating the investigator should only be considered if non-compliance continues despite corrective measures. Question 23. Adverse event reporting and compliance. A participant in a clinical trial experiences a serious adverse event 2 weeks after receiving the investigational product. The investigator has not reported the AIA to the sponsor and it appears to meet the criteria for expedited reporting. What is the CRO's responsibility in this situation? A. Ensure that the investigator reports the AIA to the sponsor immediately and document the delay in the monitoring report. B. Wait for the investigator to submit the report within the required time frame and take no action. C. Report the AIA directly to the regulatory authorities, bypassing the investigator. D. Recommend that the investigator terminate the participant's enrollment in the study due to the Answer A. Ensure that the investigator reports the AIA to the sponsor immediately and document the delay in the monitoring report. Explanation. The CRO is responsible for ensuring that serious adverse events, SAEs, are reported promptly to the sponsor. If the investigator fails to submit the report within the required time frame, the CRO should assist in facilitating the report and document any delays for compliance purposes. Option B. Waiting without taking action can lead to non-compliance and regulatory issues. Option C. The CRO should not bypass the investigator in reporting to regulatory authorities if this responsibility lies with the investigator and sponsor. Option D. Terminating the participant is not necessary unless the AIA significantly impacts their safety or the trial's progress. Question 24. Informed consent process. During a routine monitoring visit, the CRO discovers that a participant in a clinical trial signed the informed consent form after receiving the investigational product. The investigator claims that the participant had already agreed to participate verbally and the signed AIC was obtained after the dosing session. What is the CRO's responsibility in this situation? A. Document the issue, notify the investigator, and recommend retraining the site staff on proper informed consent procedures. B. Ignore the issue as long as the participant was not harmed and the study is progressing. C. Immediately report the issue to the sponsor and recommend that the participant be removed from the study. D. Allow the investigator to continue with the participant as the form was signed even though it was after dosing. Answer A. Document the issue, notify the investigator, and recommend retraining the site staff on proper informed consent procedures. Explanation. The informed consent process must occur before any study-related procedures, including dosing, to ensure that participants fully understand the risks, benefits, and nature of the trial. The CRO should document the issue, inform the investigator about the non-compliance, and recommend corrective actions. Retraining. Option B. Ignoring the issue violates regulatory requirements for informed consent. Option C. Removal of the participant is not automatically necessary unless the violation impacts their safety or the validity of the trial. Option D. Allowing the investigator to continue with the participant disregards the importance of obtaining informed consent before study procedures. Question 25. Blindness in randomized controlled trials. In a randomized controlled trial (RET), the study team learns that the investigational product has accidentally been unblinded for one of the study sites due to a mix-up in the randomization process. The site is informed of the mix-up but continues to enroll participants in the trial, knowing which treatment they are administering. What should the CRO do in this situation? A. Document the issue and recommend that the site be retrained on blinding procedures and immediately correct the randomization error. B. Allow the site to continue enrolling participants since the error was unintentional and no harm has occurred. C. Immediately terminate the site's participation in the trial due to the unblinding of the study. D. Ignore the issue since it is only one site and will not impact the overall results of the study. Answer A. Document the issue and recommend that the site be retrained on blinding procedures and immediately correct the randomization error. Explanation. Blinding is a critical aspect of maintaining the integrity of randomized controlled trials. Once a site is unblinded, it introduces bias into the study, potentially compromising the data. The CRO should document the issue, ensure corrective actions are taken to rectify the randomization error, recommend retraining to prevent future occurrences. Option B. Allowing the site to continue enrolling participants after unblinding compromises the trial's scientific validity. Option C. Terminating the site should be last resort if corrective actions do not resolve the issue. Option D. Ignoring the issue violates the principles of trial integrity and can lead to invalid results. Question 26. Data monitoring and analysis. A clinical trial has been ongoing for several months, and the Data Monitoring Committee (DMC) has raised concerns about a higher than expected incidence of adverse events (AES) in the treatment group. The sponsor is considering whether to adjust the trial protocol or stop the trial entirely. What should the CRO recommend to ensure the trial progresses in accordance with ethical guidelines? A. Recommend that the sponsor conduct an interim analysis to assess the safety and efficacy data and ensure that the protocol can be modified if necessary. B. Suggest that the sponsor stop the trial immediately as the adverse events are too concerning. C. Allow the trial to continue as planned as the AEM may resolve over time. D. Advise the sponsor to exclude the participants who experienced AES from the analysis to minimize bias. Answer A. Recommend that the sponsor conduct an interim analysis to assess the safety and efficacy data and ensure that the protocol can be modified if necessary. Explanation: an interim analysis is a valuable tool to assess the safety and efficacy of a treatment before the trial is completed. If the adverse events are concerning, the sponsor can use this analysis to determine whether the trial should continue as planned, modify the protocol, or stop. Trial for safety reasons. Option B. Stopping the trial should only occur after a thorough interim analysis and based on clear evidence of safety concerns. Option C. Ignoring safety concerns can lead to harm to participants and violate ethical research guidelines. Option D. Excluding participants who experience AES undermines the integrity of the data and could result in skewed results. Question 27. Record retention and documentation. A clinical research site has completed its study, and the site staff informs the CRA that they plan to destroy the study-related documentation, including case report form (ERFS), after 6 months as the study is completed. What is the CRA's responsibility in this situation? A. Remind the site of the regulatory requirements for record retention, which typically mandate retention of study records for at least 2 years after study completion or longer if required by local laws. B. Allow the site to destroy the records, as they have completed the study and no longer need them. C. Suggest that the site store the documents in an online database for easier access. D. Immediately report the site to the sponsor for non-compliance with record retention regulations. Answer A. Remind the site of the regulatory requirements for record retention, which typically mandate retention of study records for at least 2 years after study completion or longer if required by local laws. Explanation: regulatory requirements typically mandate that study-related records be retained for a minimum of 2 years after study completion. This ensures that the study's integrity can be verified and that data can be accessed for all purposes. The CRO should remind the site of these requirements and ensure compliance. Option B. Destroying records before the regulatory retention period has passed can lead to serious compliance issues. Option C. Storing records in an online database may be suitable but does not replace the legal requirement for physical record retention. Option D. Reporting the site should be last resort after trying to address the non-compliance with education. Question 28. Handling of randomization errors. During a study, it is discovered that a randomization error occurred at one of the trial sites, resulting in a participant being assigned to the wrong treatment group. The investigator immediately informs the CRA and the participant is removed from the trial. What should the CRA do next? A. Document the error in the monitoring report and ensure the site corrects the randomization process to prevent further issues. B. Recommend that the participant continue the study under the incorrect treatment group as it would not affect the trial's overall results. C. Notify the sponsor that the randomization error does not impact the validity of the trial and ask for further guidance. D. Stop the trial completely to avoid any further randomization at the site. Answer A. Document the error in the monitoring report and ensure the site corrects the randomization process to prevent further issues. Explanation: randomization errors can compromise the integrity of the study. The CRA should document the error and ensure that corrective measures are taken to prevent similar mistakes in the future. This includes retraining site staff if necessary and ensuring adherence to randomization procedures. Option B. Continuing the participant in the incorrect treatment group could bias the results of the trial and invalidate the data. Option C. The sponsor should be informed, but the error should be corrected to prevent future occurrences. Option D. Stopping the trial is not warranted unless randomization errors are widespread and irreparable. Question 29. Investigators cite non-compliance. During a monitoring visit, the CRA identifies several instances of non-compliance at a clinical trial site, including failure to follow the protocol regarding eligibility criteria and inaccurate reporting of adverse events AES. The investigator is unaware of the errors. What should the CRA do in this situation? A. Document the non-compliance, notify the site investigator of the findings, and request corrective actions to be implemented immediately. B. Ignore the non-compliance as long as it does not affect the overall study. C. Report the site to the sponsor with a recommendation to terminate their participation in the trial immediately. D. Advise the investigator to continue enrolling participants but with additional monitoring to ensure compliance. 4. Answer: A. Document the non-compliance, notify the site investigator of the findings, and request corrective actions to be implemented immediately. Explanation: the CRA should document any instances of non-compliance and notify the investigator of the issues. The CRA must ensure that corrective actions are taken promptly to address any violations of the protocol, ensuring that the study remains in compliance with regulatory requirements. Option B. Ignoring the non-compliance violates both regulatory and ethical standards and can impact the trial's validity. Option C. Reporting the site to the sponsor for termination is an extreme measure and should only be done if corrective actions fail or the non-compliance is severe. Option D. Additional monitoring is not enough without addressing the root cause of the non-compliance and ensuring immediate corrective actions. Question 30. Clinical trial data integrity. During a site visit, the CRA observes that several source documents are not aligned with the data recorded on the case report form (RFS). The discrepancies seem to be a result of clerical errors by the site staff. The investigator assures the CRA that these errors will be corrected. What should the CRA do in this situation? A. Allow the investigator to make the corrections and request that they document the changes for audit purposes. B. Document the discrepancies and discuss corrective actions with the site, including training staff to avoid similar errors in the future. C. Ignore the discrepancies as long as the data is not being manipulated intentionally. D. Immediately report the discrepancies to the sponsor and suggest that the site be terminated from the trial. Answer: B. Document the discrepancies and discuss corrective actions with the site, including training staff to avoid similar errors in the future. Explanation: discrepancies between source documents and RFS can compromise the integrity of the trial data. The CRA should document these discrepancies, work with the site to correct them, and ensure that staff receive training to prevent future errors. Option A. While corrections should be made, the CRA must ensure the discrepancies are documented and that corrective actions are put in place to prevent recurrence. Option C. Ignoring discrepancies undermines data integrity and violates regulatory guidelines. Option D. Immediate termination of the site is unnecessary unless the discrepancies are extensive and affect the study's overall integrity.